Welcome to SOS for Your Life, Emergency Wisdom for Everyday Life. I'm your host, Susie St. Angelo, and thank you for showing up today. Today's episode is called Budgets Don't Mean Broke. You know, finances are one of those primary foods that I've mentioned in an earlier episode that contribute to our overall health. Whether we're talking about money, managing money, sharing money, or making money, it seems like it's always on our mind. And it can be the cause of stress, physical health problems, sleep deprivation, and more. In today's episode, I'll be talking to my guest, Jessica Tomac, about budgeting. Jessica Tomac is a certified financial planner with Edward Jones. Her special passion is helping widows, divorced women, and single women understand where they have their money, what it is doing for them now, and what they can expect in the future. This podcast is for you if you know you want to change something, whether that's your career, your health, or another aspect at any age and stage in your life, and you don't know what to do or how to do it. Or you may be the person who is afraid to take that first step, caught in analysis paralysis. I see and understand you. I used to feel the same way. Now let's get into today's episode and meet my guest, Jessica Tomac. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, Susie. Thank you so much for having me today.
Well, thank you for being a guest. I'm looking forward to our conversation today. I think it'll be a fascinating conversation about budgeting, and I'd like to ask you to tell us about yourself. Tell our listeners what makes Jessica tick. What does Jessica do?
So I am all about girl power. I became a financial advisor because I really felt like women didn't have a safe place to ask questions and find out information and have someone that will help them be comfortable with finances. And that's such a big deal. So I fired 5 financial advisors before I finally decided to become one. And I've been a financial advisor for 11 years now, and really have built my business on helping women and business owners reach financial independence and security.
And what type of women do you see? Single, divorced, widowed?
All of the above, right? So they may be recently just lost a spouse, never paid a bill. They may be someone who is thinking about divorcing and want to know what does that mean for them financially? Can they do it? What will be the impact? What are things that they should be talking about, thinking about? Sometimes it's just these young families. They're like, hey, I don't even know where to start. So what do I do? Like, how do I even do this? Right? Sometimes it's people with debt and they don't know how to get out of this little hole that they've dug themselves in. So it's a gamut of people. There isn't a one size shoe fits all. Everybody's at different stages. But what I find is most people need help at each of the stages, but just differently.
Sure. So when does budgeting come into the conversation? I know it depends on each person and what brings them to you, but I would assume that at some point you're going to have this conversation about budgeting, whether it's investing or personal finance.
Yeah. So budgeting is one of the very first things I talk about with any conversation. For instance, I was just on the phone with somebody and I said, well, how much are you spending a month? And they said $3,500. And I laughed and I said, well, how much is your credit card bill a month? And they said, blank stare, $3,000. And I said, oh, that doesn't include the mortgage. It doesn't include the car payments. So people sometimes don't understand what they're paying and what their costs are. So until we can figure out what their true cost is, we can't figure out how much they're able to save or how much they should be paying down on debt or any of those basic things. And sometimes the word budget, I think people hear bread and water, I'm broke. It is not that at all. It is you telling your money where to go versus wondering where it went. And that is the reality of a budget.
Absolutely. And I think people, especially couples, maybe get a little fearful about talking about it because it can bring up some real sensitivities for people, whether it's because they weren't taught how to budget or money was always a tough conversation growing up. And so I'm sure you have some times that you have to play a role with especially couples about understanding budgets and feeling more comfortable about that process.
Yeah, and exactly to your point, how we were raised with money will greatly impact how we feel about money. So, what I find is if you came from poverty or lack, you have a tendency to try to hold on to it, not invest it, don't want to lose it, right? Versus someone who was given everything, I say the golden spoon, right? They're very risky. They're okay with, oh, I can just make more. That's a different mindset. And so when you bring those people together and they're working together, oftentimes I find one is a spender, one is a saver. And how do you build together some that can be spent and be saved and meet both goals and create that financial security and peace of mind for both parties?
So, do you find when you work with people, are you sitting down face to face with them and working on a spreadsheet of expenses and income, or are you giving them homework to do and you come back and revisit that? Can you talk a little bit about how that comes about?
Yeah, so it's all the above and really dependent upon where they live. You know, these Zoom makes it easy to go anywhere with anybody. However, we do need the data, right? And it needs to be accurate. So we have a budget template that we send out. We ask them to fill it out. And sometimes simply by me looking at it, I can be like, oh, they didn't put enough in for this, or oh, this isn't reality, right? Just simply because I've been doing this for so long. In other cases, I've had folks say to me, oh, I have no idea what I spend. It stresses me out. I can't even deal with it. So I say, give me 3 months of your credit card and your bank statements. It won't be perfect, but I can figure out where your money's going. And then we put it together in a chart. And then I say, okay, look at, I had a situation where the person was spending more on going out to eat than they had on all of their housing, mortgage, utilities, all of their basic living expenses. So they're just unaware, right? So it can be a matter of, here is the one thing I want you to go do, or go look this up and then get back with me. So it is just depending on the person, how we do it. Sometimes they'll come in. I don't find it super useful if you come in with no information. We need data, right? We need some stuff, whether you're giving me credit card statements or bank statements, or you're coming in with this document pre-filled in. You've got to take some time to look at least some of it.
And I bet there's some aha moments for people when they see what they're spending, and hopefully, if they do have these aha moments, are many of them changing their spending habits?
I think being aware is a huge piece, and sometimes even when they become aware, they don't know how to change it, because it's just happening. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times it just happened. Like, I have no idea what I bought. I bought nothing, Jessica. It just happened, right? And so then I give them tools or different things to do, where I say, hey, don't put that on the debit card, or don't put that on the credit card. You can only use cash for these items, because this is where you keep falling, right? And so we really try to give them tools of 1 or 2 simple things that they can adjust. And then we say, okay, in 2 months, let's look and see how that went. Did it go better or did it go worse? And typically it is something is better if they're doing it, or they say, oh, that was hard. I didn't like it. I don't want to do it. Well, if you don't want to do the work, I can't change that.
And it's an ongoing process, it sounds like. Obviously, tweaking the budget, it's an ongoing process too. But, it's actually seeing if people can make some changes. And by, living on a budget, it helps them also work towards investing and how much they can put towards investing.
And what I tell people is, don't beat yourself up when you got it wrong. Everyone's going to get it wrong. It doesn't matter if you're making $20,000 a year or $200,000 a year. Your budget will be wrong for the first 6 months. It takes that much time to kind of walk through and tweak it, unless you're already budgeting. And then after that, you still have an annual budget that you're looking at to kind of allocate those resources each year. So it never goes away. It becomes easier, and you have to micromanage it less, but your income is always changing. Your costs are always changing. If we look at groceries, 3 years ago versus today, it's a significant change, and you're probably not buying more stuff. You're getting less. You're just paying a lot more.
Right. Well, I think of two things when I hear you. One is giving yourself grace as you go through this process of budgeting and not beating yourself up, and two, it is an ongoing process. And how often do you suggest that people revisit their budget?
So when you're just starting out, you have to do it every month. And I prefer, if you get paid once a week, I prefer you look at it once a week. If you get paid every other week, I prefer you look at it every other week, because typically you're going to pay bills when you get paid. So then you can really start to understand and track that. If you're already doing budgeting and you've been doing it, once a month is sufficient. And then as you become more comfortable and have less changes, once every 3 months and then 6 months and then, once a year is fine once you get an established process in place.
I remember using a spreadsheet, and actually it was really watching my dad, who was still not using a computer but doing his own spreadsheet on a piece of graph paper. But then I did it on the computer for me, and that helped me. That was long before all these apps and these tools are out there now to help you with that, and your services, of course. But it was good to see what I was spending on a monthly basis and to track that. So I'm more of a visual person, and I don't know if your clients are too, but I think it just helps to see that, whether it's in a graph or in a spreadsheet or whatever it looks like.
Yeah, and it was great. So I'm a nerd. I'm a nerd at heart, right? So my spreadsheet was huge, 27 pages, linked to all kinds of stuff. But if you started to get close to going over, it would turn the box red, right? So when you got close, it turned it yellow. You could say, oh, we're getting close to this budget line item for the month, or it would turn red if you were going over, so that you could really easily see, hey, this is bad. And some of these apps that are out there, like Best Budget and Every Dollar, will do that same thing for folks. It just depends if you prefer electronic. I do think when you're first starting out budgeting, well, many of the younger people love their apps. I do, for me personally, I think the paper is easier to feel it, touch it, and kind of walk through it. But I understand not everyone loves the paper process, so there are apps out there that can be beneficial.
What do you think the common mistakes are people make about budgeting, other than probably underestimating their spending and their debt?
I think the biggest mistake people make is they think they have to be perfect, and when it's not perfect, they quit.
And you get them back on track?
Yes, if they want to do the work, right? Those folks that are like, oh, it's just not working, we can give them different tools and different ideas. We have a ton of success stories of, there was a young couple, they're in their early 20s, to be honest, and they had $27,000 in debt. They wanted to buy a house. They couldn't pay their bills. They were living paycheck to paycheck. I said, hey, look, if you walk through this process with me, I assure you in 12 months, based on the information you've given me, I can have you 100% out of debt, and I can have a $20,000 down payment for your home. Now, if you don't do what I ask, you'll have neither of those and probably more debt. So we walked through it, and they did. And they were super excited that I can't believe it. I would have never saved this, right? Sometimes you just have to save differently or look at things differently. It wasn't easy. It wasn't fun, right? But if you can see what the goal is, sometimes it's easier to tolerate being uncomfortable. And what I tell folks is if you're willing to be uncomfortable in the first 3 to 6 months, you can achieve a lot. And then you can add back in some of those luxuries that maybe we had to take out to get you in a better position.
And I'm sure it was a confidence builder for that particular couple to see what they had accomplished in that 12-month period.
Yeah, it was huge. They were so excited.
That's a great story. Do you have any other success stories you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think another success story was a lady who had went through a horrible divorce and was surviving, not well, on credit cards. She had 35 different credit cards, and most of them at 26.99% or higher. And she was making the minimum payment on some and nothing on others. So we were able to put together a plan, I actually helped her contact the creditors as we were building up little pockets of money, because some of them were so delinquent, to then negotiate a payoff amount and be done. So at the end for her, it took 24 months, but at the end of 24 months, we had all of the credit cards gone, and she was actually paying for what she was purchasing.
That's wonderful. What I think too about, as you mentioned this, is her credit score. Did you work with her on improving her credit score?
It naturally went up as we started closing accounts and having more things paid versus, and when you do those buy-offs, that does ding your credit score. So it was already terrible. So I wasn't worried about damaging it more. We just had to get through, and then it would start to correct itself. So and budgeting isn't just for folks that are struggling with finances. You know, I've had many business owners who they pay a lot in taxes, right? So they are not in a budgeting of like, I can't afford this or I can't do it, but it's really about repositioning assets and repositioning funds to make it either tax-free or tax-deferred. And so we help them kind of look at their big plan financially, and then how we can help position their cash flow as well.
Sure. So you collaborate with other financial professionals like CPAs?
Yes. Yep. So I partner with CPAs and attorneys, are kind of the key sources that I work in partnership with.
Sure. Well, you have a full service approach between, your budgeting and your your compassion and your passion to help people, and your knowledge. So I'm sure people get a lot for what they're paying you for. So, and I assume that you're paid on a flat fee. Is that correct?
So in some of these cases, I actually don't take any payment at all. So part of my give back to the community and people is just to empower them with knowledge and power. So in some cases, it's just my way to give back, and they're not charged anything because they're not actually doing any investing. We're just trying to help them financially get a handle on kind of where they're at. For other folks, if they're doing investing with me, then typically that is a fee-based type of work, so that they're not paying per transaction, but for their overall advice.
Well, I appreciate you explaining that and sharing that, and that's a wonderful service you provide. Do you work with people both in town and outside of the state?
Yeah, I have folks currently in about 27 states that I'm registered in. And again, because Zoom makes life so easy, we can help people anywhere.
That's great. So what would be your SOS, that one or two simple steps our listeners could take away today that they could immediately incorporate into their lives to make things better, besides contacting you, of course?
So two things. If you don't have $500 saved in your bank account for your emergency fund, I would say that is your number one goal to achieve. And likely the only way that you will achieve that is by doing a budget. So that's the other part of that. And really everybody should have a budget, regardless if you're making $20,000 or $300,000, to understand that cash flow. So if there's one thing I would tell folks to do today is create your budget. And if you don't know how, seek out myself or someone, or templates. There's all kinds of stuff out there, but really start to understand how much money should you have per month.
Mm-hmm. Those are great tips. It's interesting. I heard something a couple of years ago during the pandemic that a very small percentage of people in the United States have $1,000 saved. And it really made me sad that people were that, I don't want to say poor at all. I just want to say that they didn't have a cushion.
They had no room for unexpected expenses. And most of the time, it isn't because they're poor. They're just choosing to spend everything they make, right? Those Starbucks add up, that newest iPhone adds up, right? This unlimited whatever, or 50 subscriptions to all this stuff that you can Hulu and Netflix and, all of those things, while they might seem like they're $10 or $20, they all add up. And so really it's oftentimes it's choices.
Sure, absolutely. Was there any question you wish I'd asked today?
I think that and it's not really a question, but I think that sometimes people are hesitant to do a budget. They think it's going to be too hard, right? And it's not difficult, but it does take work and it does take practice. So my one thing would be is don't give up, right? Keep trying. If you fail, pick yourself back up. If you have a partner that you're doing things with and working through your finances, I find that one is weak and the other one is strong. And then it switches, and maybe the other one wants to impulse buy something, and then you're like, no, we got this. So use your resources. If you are single or a widow, find someone who can be that support system for you and help. Just sometimes talking it out really helps. I have folks that call me and they say, hey, here's what I'm thinking. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's great. Or, oh, don't do that. Have you thought about this, this, and this? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, we got to think about that before you go and do this. So I really think, if there's one thing I would tell folks is it's never too late to start. And it's always better to start today.
Good advice. And it's okay to ask for help.
Asking for help is not failing. We don't have to do it on our own. And what I would tell you is if I got in a car and I said I wanted to head to Florida and I started driving south, I might end up in Texas and then I'd have to cut across. It is way more efficient for you to have someone who knows what they're doing to help guide you with your little GPS coordinates straight to Florida. So you don't have to take all the bumps and bruises from trying to learn on your own and become an expert in something.
Very good point. Very good example, too. So, Jessica, where can listeners find you?
So I am on LinkedIn. I am on Facebook. They can look me up at Edward Jones and Jessica Tomac, and it will pull up my webpage. All of those places are great places to find me.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for being my guest today on SOS for Your Life, Emergency Wisdom for Everyday Life. I look forward to having a continued conversation with you about other things related to finance, because as we know, diet and exercise is not the only part of our health. Our financial health is extremely important too. So thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, Susie.
Friends, sadly, that's all the time we have today. Thank you for listening to SOS for Your Life, Emergency Wisdom for Everyday Life. Today's episode was a summary of our financial health and specifically budgeting. Quick reminder on how you can support this podcast: like and share, send me a review or any question you might have, and your question may be featured on an upcoming episode. Follow me on Instagram, and if you'd like to be added to my email newsletter, send me your email address. I'm happy to include you. And reach out to me if you're interested in finding out more about coaching and breathwork sessions. Until then, take care and see you next time.